and welcome. I'm sorry I'm a little bit breathless. I've just run across the street from the other courthouse after finishing a hearing, so if I appear breathless, that's the reason why. My name is William Hughes, and I'm judge at Hamilton Superior Court number 3. Most of you know me. Many of you I know are members of the community who may not know who I am. Nor may you know why I'm standing up here. 2 reasons. One, I'm the longest serving judge in Hamilton County at this point in time, so they made the old guy be the master soon. And secondly, I'm here celebrating something that we as a bar in Hamilton County used to do all the time and have not done for a few years, which is very important, especially today. We are here to honor a member of the bar, one of my colleagues, who stood for justice, who stood for making the right decisions at the right time for the right reason, and who touched every life that happens to practice law in this county. And that's why we're here today. I'd like to introduce to you first one of my colleagues who has the honor of sitting in the seat that Judge Sturtevant started as his successor, the Honorable David Najjar, for a few comments. Proclamation, I believe.
Thank you, Judge Hughes. I feel a bit privileged not only to be able to succeed Judge Sturtevant in his office in Superior Court 5, but also because I got to sort of bridge his 2 great careers as a prosecutor and then later as a judge. I started in the prosecutor's office as just a clerk, as an intern while he was the chief deputy prosecutor, and then later on, while I was still in law school, I got to try one of my first cases with Wayne as my supervising attorney. It was a life and death situation, I'm sure, at least to someone. I believe it was an infraction case involving someone who was not obeying the paint on the road or road markings or something like that. But it was something that I have never forgotten. And then later on, after he was elected judge, I got to be one of the first prosecutors to practice in his court. And now, as Judge Hughes says, I get to sit in the same place where he sat for so many years. And so it is my honor at this time to read the resolution of the Hamilton County Bar Association honoring the life and law practice of the Honorable Wayne A. Sturtevant. The Honorable Wayne A. Sturtevant was born in New York and graduated from Butler University in 1973 with a BA in History and Political Science. While at Butler, he was a member of the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity. He graduated from the Indiana University School of Law in 1977. Upon graduating from law school, he opened a private practice and eventually joined the Boone County Prosecutor's Office and later the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office, where he advanced to Chief Deputy Prosecutor. In 1996, Wayne was elected to the newly created Hamilton Superior Court number 5, where he was re-elected until he retired in 2017. He was active in the Hamilton County Bar Association as an attorney and then as a judge. As a lawyer and a judge, Wayne practiced and exemplified a commitment to justice and positive community involvement. Wayne was pivotal to the implementation of the pretrial release program, and he remained involved in the Hamilton County pretrial release program even after he retired from the bench. He also served on the Indiana Supreme Court's criminal bench book, probation, and jury instructions committees. He was a former member of the board of directors of the Judicial Conference of Indiana. He co-founded the girls' division of the Fishers Youth Soccer League. He coached his daughters in soccer and basketball and continued coaching basketball throughout his life connecting him to the community. Wayne saw the practice of law and service as a trial court judge as honorable professions. His civility and his dedication to justice for all individuals brought honor and credit to the legal community and to the state as a whole. Now therefore be it resolved that the Hamilton County Bar Association hereby memorializes the life and work of the Honorable Wayne A. Sturtevant as testimony of the esteem of the members of the Hamilton County Bar Association for the Honorable Wayne A. Sturtevant's many years of service. It is adopted this 19th day of May, 2021. It is signed by the President of the Bar Association, Mr. Carl A. Markovich, and attested by Ms. Brandy Gibson, the Secretary. This time, it is my honor to introduce Judge Sturtevant's daughter, Ms. Lauren Sturtevant, who will speak on behalf of the family.
Hi. Most of you knew my dad knew Wayne as the Honorable Judge Sturtevant, but I was lucky enough to know him as simply Dad. On behalf of my family, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here today and honor him. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Lauren, and I'm Wayne's youngest daughter. Although me and my sisters, Darby and Allison, did see the serious judge side on that rare occasion of when we were caught misbehaving, mostly we saw the kind-hearted, fair man that made such an impression on all of you. He put the same dedication and passion that he put into his work into being our dad. He was a constant presence throughout our life, whether it was a shoulder to cry on, a voice of reason, or simply a listening ear. Our dad was that person for our family, and likely for many of you as well. He was every bit of the father you would imagine such a judge to be. He taught us the importance of right and wrong. He mediated disagreements with my sisters, and he taught us to look at others' viewpoints and think before speaking. But beyond all this, he was also the dad that read us bedtime stories, took us sledding, showed us how to drive a stick shift, played Easter Bunny and Santa Claus at the holidays, and coached us in basketball and soccer. He was always quick with a joke, even if it was the epitome of a corny dad joke. He shared his love with us in so many ways, and we would give anything to create one more of these memories with him. My dad's retirement from the job he loved was jam-packed with adventures you may have heard of to the Galapagos Islands and to Iceland, but before this, he had some lesser-known adventures too. He loved to share how he attended Woodstock. Yes, Judge Sturtevant was in New York for that famous Wild Musical Festival that was still iconic to this day. And at the beginning of what he may have described as his favorite adventure, that is, his 47-year marriage to my mom, Jeannie. They lived on an exotic animal farm in a barn shared by llamas. More recently, he discovered a love for whitewater kayaking and also pursued a goal of hiking the Appalachian Trail. If he was on the move, then he was enjoying his family, especially his 4 granddaughters, who adoringly referred to him as GP. One of his few regrets was that his granddaughters weren't also able to call him Coach and share his love for sports with him, as he was so looking forward to doing. He was able, though, to show him through his example how to live life to the fullest and to dream big. In the days before his passing, my dad accepted his death with the same dignity and grace that he lived his life. He was the one reassuring us that he was proud of the life he had lived and was happy to be leaving the world a better place through the work he had accomplished in the courtroom and through the daughters he had raised. My sisters and I will continue his legacy by passing his values that he instilled in us on to our children. My hope is that one day I can not only be half the parent he was, but to be half the person.
Thank you, Lauren. Our next speaker will be Mr. Bill Wynn. Bill was a fraternity brother of Wayne, as I understand it.
My name is Bill Wynn. Thank you. Yes, I was a fraternity brother of Wayne's. He and I both arrived at Butler University in September of 1969, and I was from the South, via Chicago, and Wayne was from New York. And we got to know each other that freshman year a little bit, but our friendship really deepened at the beginning of our second year. Both of our roommates didn't pan out. If anybody goes back to their college days can remember those situations. And we had known each other before, but it was kind of like we looked at each other, and this is like the first week of classes, and said, hey, why not? So we moved in together in Ross Hall, room 222, and thus began a developing closer relationship. You know, it's interesting when I look back and I think about our times together, and I think it was really forged in that first few years at Butler. And you think, when you're in school like that, in a 4-year period of time, from 1969 to 1973, you're deciding what you're going to do, who you're going to marry, typically, where you're going to end up starting your life. And I don't know about you folks, but when I'm going through all those types of decision making, I like to bounce ideas off of other people. And Wayne and I know this is going to sound prehistoric, but at that time at Butler University, we had something called women's hours. So Sherry, my bride of 49 years, had to be back at Twitcher Hall by 10 o'clock on weekdays and 1 o'clock in the morning on weekends. So that meant we had our time, and we would lay, and I can still picture it, in our little beds and the room and the desk between us, and talk. And I insisted on going to sleep to music, which he tolerated. So we would go to sleep to Chicago or Moody Blues or Jethro Tull, whatever I happened to be liking at the time. And then we would talk, and we would just bounce ideas about each other. And I think as time went on, we didn't realize it, but we were, even though we have no Wayne, I am the absolute opposite of Wayne. Wayne is very single-minded, he makes a decision and he sticks with it, and I am just wishy-washy and kind of all over the place. But we just bonded well. And so that began our life together. And as I look back in these last few months, how many times I'll be talking to somebody and I'll be telling them a story about something that I did, a hike that I took, or a trip that I took, or an event that happened in my life. And so many times that event, somehow or another, Wayne was in the midst of it. We just ended up doing so much together. I could stand up here for a long time and tell you lots of little adventures that we had. But you know, none of them were that exciting when you think about it. It's just that we did it together. And and in the midst of doing it, we were conversing. We started, at some point when our children were young, we decided to take a canoe trip. I live up in Kosciuszko County, and we did the first little section of about 5 miles of the Tippecanoe River, which is where the headwaters of the Tippy River is. And after we got out, it was kind of like, that was kind of cool, let's do it again. So we did. And it took us 20 years, 258 miles, or 298 miles, however long the Tippy River is, and we did that entire river. And I will just tell you one quick story. At one point, on that river trip, we actually got lost. Now, you don't think about it. How do you get lost in the river? We took the wrong turn on the river and ended up in a swamp. And that ended up being a swamp. And at one point, Lauren, she didn't do it, I think we did it once, but she actually went along with us on one of those trips, and it was so funny. We had to get home. We had to figure out how to get home because we couldn't get to where we left our car. And we were both just coated in mud and all this. And we walked up to a house and we saw they had a pickup truck. So we said, this is somebody who could give us a ride in our canoe. And we sent Lauren, who I don't remember how old she was at the time, but she was covered in mud as well, but we figured they couldn't send away a little 9-year-old sweet little girl. So it worked, and we got a ride and managed to get back. I like Lauren. You knew Wayne as the attorney, the judge, and he was great at that. I knew Wayne as the person that was my companion through life. And as I look back over my life, and it's hard to believe, but I'm actually going to be turning 70 this year, I think about all the things that have happened to me that have been so positive. And one of the things that happened was with relationships. I'm very relational, and I have lots of friends, but Wayne was just that person who had seen me at the very beginning and was thoroughly persuaded of my worth. And we went through times where we were having trouble with our kids, or we were having trouble with our businesses, or whatever it might be. And he was always that steady voice that could get me through it. And a friend is somebody, you want to surround yourself with people that are, dreamers. You want to surround yourself with people who are thinkers and people who think out of the box and in the box and all this stuff. But the real important person to surround yourself with is that person who knows you and can encourage you and push you when you yourself have given up on yourself. And Wayne was that person. He was the consummate coach for me. And he will forever be in my heart. So thank you for allowing me to say this, and family, you guys are
It seems like our next speaker is somebody who, in my experience, was sort of attached to Wayne. She was always there. If you needed to find out how to speak to Wayne, or you wanted to see Wayne, she was the person that you saw. If Wayne wasn't available and you need to know what Wayne needed or Wayne wanted, she was the person that you saw. Tina Newby is our next speaker.
I don't like to do anything without being prepared. So I borrowed my granddaughter's laptop and I spent 5 hours in front of it. It wrote something this long, it wrote something this long. I wrote one line and said to the Lord, I said, I can't do this because I didn't know where to start. So I remember a little of all the big stuff I wrote. So just starting at the beginning, when Wayne was elected, we talked about who we were going to bring on as staff, and we made deals that we would talk to each other about who we were going to hire. And one day I went in his office and I said, I just hired Helen Huffman as our bailiff. He goes, that's okay, I just hired Mary Kettner as our court reporter. So we each brought a security blanket with us. Helen was mine. And she was the security blanket for the whole entire thing. The thing that I remember most about him, what he was very, very kind, and he was humble. We had, I didn't have the heart to leave his name off in my contact list, so I put Jeannie's name under Wayne's. And 6 months after he passed away, I got a phone call from Wayne. And I'm jumping up and down, I'm like, Wayne's calling, Wayne's calling. And then I remembered it was Jeannie, and that was the next best thing. So she made the comment, it's been 6 months, do you think anyone will remember? And it made me wonder, did she think that anyone could forget him? He was so, so kind. He had to do our evaluations one time. And I was getting good numbers on everything, and it came to attitude, and he took his pen and he wavered back and forth between 1 and 5. I said, hey, I don't have an attitude. I'm like, no, because I have a good poker face. And he says, oh, sure. So I ran out in the hallway and I grabbed all my coworkers and I'm like, do I have an attitude and don't I have a good poker face? And they looked like deer in headlights and I was driving the car. So I made a vow to work on my attitude. And sometime after that, Lori and I got in trouble. And
Throw me under the bus.
we got called to Wayne's office. And we were holding each other up and shaking and scared. It was like being called to your mom and your dad and the principal and your boss and God's office all at the same time. So we went in there and sat down. Right, but he was very kind and he said, why did you do what you did? And because I made a vow to work on my attitude, I didn't say, duh, because we were stupid. But remember that day.
I know.
Yeah, he was kind all the time. One time I bought a box of cookies. They're Scooby cookies, they're graham crackers shaped like dog biscuits. So I thought I'm going to trick him. And I put him in a plastic container. And I took him in there and I said, I got some dog biscuits for your dogs. And he goes, well, that was really nice. I opened the lid and I took one out and started to eat it. And I said, he's sitting there. I said, you were going to let me eat a dog biscuit. And he said, well, I figured you knew what you were doing. We knew him as judge and boss. Thankfully, we had Jeannie, who would come and have lunch with us and who would let us in on the secret life of Wayne, because he was a fun guy and we didn't know. Because he was either in his office or in the courtroom, because Jeannie asked, do you remember any sayings that he said all the time? And he was so quiet that, I couldn't think of one thing, but he was just always kind. So I try and pass that on, and every time I do, I pass it along in the name of Wayne. So
I'm just going to build on that, what you said. First, I was going to have to take over because Tina wasn't sure she could do this, but I came a little bit prepared. My name's Lori Kettner. I was Judge Sturtevant's court reporter for his entire tenure on the bench. And today I'm speaking for the entire staff. We tried to come up with the words to say, and we decided the words just weren't adequate to describe how we felt, how much we loved Wayne Sturtevant. And it's just difficult to narrow that down to just a few sentences. But he made us want to be better people. Tina, Helen, Mary, Cindy, Jennifer, and I never wanted to let Judge Sturtevant down. We certainly didn't want to disappoint him. We didn't want to upset him. We didn't want to embarrass him or make the court look bad, but we still managed to do it from time to time. You see today the videos, and that Wayne Sturtevant was so much more than just a lawyer or a judge, but for those of us in Superior 5, we didn't get to see the personal side of him very much. And it was when Jeannie and the girls came in and they told stories and tales, and we got to find out more about him. He'd just sit there and kind of just not say too much. He'd go along with the program, nod his head.
he was a good sport.
Yeah, he was. Wayne not only developed Hamilton Superior Court 5 from the beginning, but he nurtured and created the Superior Court 5 family. We actually do like each other a lot. If you think about it, Wayne lived at home with wife and 3 daughters, and then he came into court, worked, and here he is surrounded by 5 women. And the poor man was just surrounded by females with hormones. It was awful for him, I'm sure. Judge Sturtevant was the first one in the office in the morning, and he was the last one to leave at night. On his very first day as judge in Superior 5, we saw him take the weight of that office, put it on his shoulders, and he skillfully carried it until the day he retired. His dedication to his work is, as far as I'm concerned, unmatched, and we loved him for it. But he also drove us crazy. These stupid, tiny little Post-it notes were the bane of our existence. He would write notes on here in little tiny script and would somehow squeeze an entire order on these things. We couldn't talk him into using the bigger ones, he had to use the little Sometimes the other girls in the office would come to me with one of the post-it notes, and they'd ask me to translate it for them because I knew shorthand, and his penmanship really resembled it a lot, so it was not a lot of fun sometimes. Before court, Judge Sturtevant would stand outside the courtroom by the bailiff station. Paul saw that a lot of times. And he would count down the seconds until it was time to go into the courtroom. We didn't want to be a minute late because that was too late. And you knew if Wayne Sturtevant was late for a court hearing, that something really bad happened. Then there was the look. Does that seem familiar? Yeah, the look. I suspect some of you may have even experienced that phenomenon. His glare could probably melt the polar ice cap. He could really look through you. And if Judge Sturtevant wasn't directing that look at you, you still feel guilty about something, even though, you know, it wasn't at you. How many of you appeared before Judge Sturtevant and noticed there was always a glass of water on the bench? Always, wasn't there? That is the sacred water glass. And we filled it every morning and refilled it every afternoon. And sometimes he would never take a sip of water from that during court. But at the end of the session, he'd chug that thing down. And I think he was a camel in disguise because he would never take a restroom break. Our poor deputy prosecutors would sit at that table and their eyes would turn yellow. We would see praying for recesses. I don't know how they did it. But one of the most notable things about Judge Sturtevant was when he was irritated by a defendant. His voice would get a little louder. The voice would rise an octave, and the girls in the office would be listening, and they could tell somebody was in trouble. And it wasn't one of us, so we were glad. When he would raise his voice, I could hear the girls in the office running towards the monitor to the courtroom because they wanted to see what was going on. And after the hearing was over, Wayne would come out, and they'd all be huddled around the monitor, and he'd look at them like, what's going on? Why are you doing this? So he never got what we were doing, thankfully. And you always knew where you stood with Wayne Sturtevant. As defense attorneys, some of you were able to tell your clients in advance what to expect from Wayne Sturtevant, couldn't you? You knew what he was going to do. He was so consistent and so predictable that sometimes I could have an order typed and ready for his signature before he ever announced his decision. But Superior 5 was never boring, and it still isn't. We were absolutely thrilled when, after Judge Sturtevant retired, the governor gave us another great judge, David Bishar. He, as you know, Wayne mentored David, and David was a prosecutor in our court. David was familiar with us. He knew what to expect, and he still wanted the job, so we thanked him. We are all a lot better people because of our interactions with Wayne. He had high standards, and he lived by them. It was an absolute honor and privilege to work with Judge Sturtevant for the entirety of his time on the bench. He's gone, but he'll never be forgotten. We all miss you, boss.
Lori was the only one that could ever type up an order really.
All right, Tina, come on.
We don't be, sitting at our desk typing up 19 rough drafts. So.
Thank you, Tina and Laurie. Those of you who are here who are lawyers, if there's ever an event like this after I pass, make sure you don't let Carol Ann speak. Our last speaker, scheduled speaker, is somebody who knew Wayne, I believe, from the day he started practicing law in Hamilton County, and even beyond the day he retired as judge. It's my friend and former colleague, the Honorable Steve Nation. Thank you.
Well, I'm going just to tell you a couple stories about Wayne. When I came in here and I saw the pictures of him running and those things, let me tell you about when he was just into the office as a deputy prosecutor. And at that time, I was probably about 40 pounds lighter, and he said, "Would you like to run?" And I said, "Sure. Where do you want to run?" He said, "I'll see you down at Fort Bend." Now, little did I know that as I drove to Fort Bend, he rode his bike there. And the other problem with Wayne when he ran, he would talk with you during the whole run, like we were talking right now. And of course, I was just barely surviving the 5-mile run. And I told him, I'm never doing this again. But Wayne, there was another time we were out at the judicial conference in Reno, and Wayne came up to me at the end of the day and he said, I got us free dinner. If you knew Wayne, he liked free stuff. And he said, I got us a free dinner. And I said, really? Where is the free dinner? He said, there's a new casino opening up just north of Reno, and we can walk there, because he didn't want to pay for the cab. He said, we can just walk there. This thing's like 3 miles out. And so as we're going there, I remember Wayne saying, man, I cannot believe it's this far. So about halfway there, we see this building, and we think, well, this is finally going to be the place. And Wayne goes, great, I have to go to the bathroom, and we can, this is good. Well, as we walk up on it, it's a biker bar. And I said to Wayne, I said, you go on in, I'm going to stay out here. And Wayne goes, no, for some reason, I don't have to go anywhere. So we walk another 10, 15 miles. And we get into the casino. They give us a foot-long hot dog, I think 8 ounces of Coke, and a token. So we used the token. We didn't win anything. We ate the hot dog and drank the Coke. He said, okay, I'm ready to go back. But I'm going, we just walked all this. But that's what we did. And thank goodness there was another person from the college at the time, and he took us on back, so we didn't have to do that. But one thing that anybody that knew Wayne, and it would be just hard for me not to mention, was the living suit. And for those who did not know him during his deputy prosecutor years, in fact, Rick Campbell made up a sign with this gentleman in the suit with a judge, and it was entitled The Living Suit, and then underneath it, it was When Style is Irrelevant. Wayne wore that suit, I think, for the whole years of being deputy prosecutor. You still got it? Now see, the rumor is that it would never tear. You didn't have to wash it. It would clean itself. And it was finally, the rumor that we had was it was donated to NASA. They wanted to go ahead and to figure out how this happened, that this suit would last all those years. It could even change colors. That was the neat thing about it. Depending on Wayne's mood, it would change colors as he'd go around. And you'd think it was a different suit, but it was the same suit. Well, I will tell you, anybody who's ever tried a case with Wayne, brilliant mind, just an absolute brilliant mind. Now, sometimes I would have to tell him, after he would go into this long explanation of what he was thinking, I'd say, we're not presenting this to Butler students. We gotta dumb it down a little bit. Because he would go off on one case, on a murder case that he second chaired with me. Wayne, there was this car, and the oil dropped out of the car at a certain rate, and he said, let me present this, let me present this. And I thought, nobody's going to follow it. But Wayne had all the statistics and everything, and he got it together, and the jury loved it. And he said, after the guy was going to go, Wayne said, see, I told you. But yeah, Wayne was, I thought, just a brilliant individual. He was somebody that cared so much for people. I remember him calling me up one time, and I went down to his office. And he cared for people so much that he did not want to make a decision, but the law required him to make it. And but he did it exactly the way he was supposed to. And, you know, I told him, this is the tough time, you just have to go ahead and to take it as a judge. He loved people, he loved the law. He was devoted as a husband, as a father, and as a grandfather. He loved you guys. And the neat thing about him, he was so consistent. I think what Bill was saying, he was always a loyal guy. He was just so consistent. You never had to worry where Wayne was going to come from. Now, again, sometimes you had to dumb it down so he could understand it, but he was always loyal and was always there. We're going to miss him here in the county, not only from the law and not only for what he did for everybody here, but just as a friend. And that's all the remarks I have. Does anybody want to come forward and make some other remarks concerning Wayne? Please come on up.
Well, I'll just stand here. My name is Paul Cash. I was Wayne's first public defender in all of the so I was with him the entire time. So I saw many of the changes he made in himself as far as ruling from the bench. But I was lucky enough one time I asked him a question. I went back to speak to him. He had time for me. And that was, I think, his first mistake, because after that, I would go back pretty frequently and try to talk to him and say something. I'd say, "Are you busy?" And after a while, he'd say yes, and try to get rid of me. I'd say, "I just need 5 minutes," but he always gave me that time. And we'd started to become friends and spend a little more time talking to each other. And eventually, we got to do some things together outside of the courtroom and became better friends. But I have always, as you've heard, he was stoic. If he even raised the side of his mouth a crack, you knew you got through to him somehow. So I kind of made it my mission to try to get to him for various things in various different ways through those 20-some years. But probably the best thing was I was on my way to court, right up here. Around the courthouse, I caught my foot and broke my ankle. But I kept going because I knew I couldn't miss. And he would be upset if he didn't get to have his hearing. So I went in, did the hearing, went to the doctor the next day, and it was broken. So I had one of those boots that you had to wear. Well, this was about this time of the year, end of May, early June, July, August. I still have the boot on because I get to wear shorts. Shorts and a golf shirt to come to court. I was loving it. He didn't. And so by September, he called me and he said, "Well, how's your leg doing?" I said, "Oh, you know, it's coming along." He says, "Well, how long are you going to wear that boot?" I said, "I talked to the doctor." September, Halloween. He calls me in. It wasn't anymore, "How long are you going to wear the boot?" It was, "How long are you going to wear that damn boot?" I said, I'm not until the doctor tells me I can't. Thanksgiving comes around. By now, the boot could have maybe come off if I really wanted to. But it was warm enough, I still wanted to wear my shorts. So I wore my shorts until 2 weeks before Christmas. He even offered to buy me long pants to fit over the boot and everything else. But that was the side of him that most of us didn't get to see. And it was fun teasing with him and joking with him. And yes, he would tease and joke back if you got to know him better. So I was lucky enough to have that little extra relationship with him. It meant a lot to me, quite a bit in these last couple of years. But the last thing I wanted to say was I was lucky enough. Jeannie made sure that I was able to talk to Wayne. He called me a couple days before he died, and we talked. And he said, "You know," he said, I appreciate you coming and talking to me all those years. I said, "Well, it sure didn't sound like it." He even offered me a V8 one time, and I knew I was in after that. but he said something to me that meant a lot to me that I really would like to pass on to everybody here. He said, "Thank you for coming in and talking to me and spending some time with me." He said, "You don't know how lonely it is in here. I don't have that camaraderie and closeness with the rest of the bar that I used to have." And I said, "Well, you have me, you know, so you have it." But I want to pass that along to everybody that was my lesson that I learned, and I think that we should all be that way. Just because our judges are locked in their room doesn't mean that they don't need us and we need them, and we should probably spend a little more time together.
My name is Sonia Learcamp, and Wayne and I grew up together as prosecutors. He actually started with the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office 6 months after I did, and so I was a little senior to him, both in age and in experience at that point. But we shared a caseload in the county court, and so, you know, we essentially just had one of us took all the even cases, the other took all the odd cases, and it developed a professional relationship and a strong friendship at the same time. He was a fabulous collaborator and always available if I had questions, or, you know, we would just work things out together so that we could be consistent in the way that cases were managed in that particular court. And then we each managed to rise up into felony positions while we were with the office, and continued to be friends. And ultimately, when I was elected prosecutor, he was my first chief deputy. And one of the things that I want to share with you, and I hope I can get through it without tears, I'm sure everyone would be surprised if I broke down crying. No, this was when we were doing the Carmel triple homicide, and we were trying the case up in South Bend. And you may remember then that I had a little episode of tears because the stress of everything, and as you might remember, we even had SWAT teams protecting us during that trial. So there was a lot going on. I thought Tina she was still a secretary in the office at that time, and I wasn't sure she was going to survive the trial because she was so stressed out by all of the security that was required and the tension that was in the air throughout. And at one point in time, Wayne was actually first chair and I was second chairing him on that case. And we were called to a sidebar, and like I said, I was pretty tired and edgy, and I took exception with a ruling the judge made, and he verbally smacked me down. And then he took a break because we all kind of needed the tension to go away for a minute. During that break, I broke down, completely broke down, crying, sobbing. And then and I was looking everywhere for Wayne. I couldn't figure out where he was. And finally, when I found him, I said, I've got to get back to the hotel. I can't stay in here. It was almost the end of the day. And then, of course, I had like 4 police officers escorting me back to the hotel, which was even more mortifying. So by the time I get back to my hotel room, I'm just sobbing. I'm just a basket case, not only because of the fatigue and the stress and everything else, but now I know I'm going to be in the papers for crying in the middle of this and embarrass myself in front of my county that elected me prosecutor. And he finished up the day, came back to my room, sat with me. I don't even remember how long he sat with me to calm me down. And then the tidbit that I have to share with you is that he shared with me one of the most mortifying experiences of his life. And I'm going to take it to my grave with me. But that was the kind of person he was, that he would get that personal with me. And we were fast friends forever. And I will always miss him.
My name's Dan Flagey.
and I have known Wayne, well, I've known Wayne so long that I actually had a case against him when he's in private practice in science. And I'm pretty sure not too many other people. He took his client through bankruptcy and wiped out my client's judgment. That, in spite of that, we went a long way together. Someone mentioned that he was a co-founder of the Fisher's Girls Program. Well, I was probably the other co, and through that I got to coach his daughter Allison, and that was a great experience. My daughter was on the team. So we coached together. I reffed Darby and Lauren's soccer matches, so I got to see him as a fan, and he was the same type of gentleman as a coach, a father, a judge, and a fan. I never heard anything from Wayne, and there were probably some times I could have said something. Then I ended up in the prosecutor's office, so we tried a case against Greg Caldwell, which is an experience in and of itself. Some of you young people will never get the benefit of having that. That was wonderful. Wayne got to try that case 2 more times, because if there was anything, and by that time I was out of the office, if there was anything Caldwell could do, it was create air. And so that was interesting, and Wayne and I, the first time it was tried, did it together. After that, I became a public defender in circuit court, and Wayne was in circuit court, and we had 6 jury trials during that time. The very last one, he exercised, I believe, 4 or 5 strikes for cause. I did about the same number. 6 jury trials against Wayne, that one hung. I consider that a victory against Wayne, because if he took you to trial, he usually got a conviction. Then we ended up on the bench together, and that was an experience. I was very lucky, because I sometimes never felt myself maybe as intellectually or evidence as wise as some of the other guys on the bench. But when I had a question, I could run to Wayne, I could run to Steve, or I could run to the guru of evidence, Bill Hughes, and I didn't get reversed too many times. One, we got to try it a couple of times. But then I ended up retiring, and I hooked up with Stephanie and John Terry, and at that time Russ Cade. And so I appeared, and my first appearance in a court after retiring from the bench was in front of Wayne. And I did it 3 or 4 more times, and I loved going to his court. Our relationship was also different. Like I indicated, I got to know the girls and everything, but Wayne thought enough of me, and his daughter thought enough of me, that I got to perform a wedding ceremony, which was just an outstanding experience for me, and it made me feel so good. We will miss it.
I'm Stephanie Dukins, and I was one of Judge Sturtevant's public defenders as well. And I want to tell you how that came about, and then a little funny. So it was 2000 when I came to Noblesville practice, and I was an associate for Steve Holt and Sean Fleck. And occasionally, Steve would send me to court to cover for him, and it was in Superior 5. And Judge Sturtevant was on the bench, and at the end of the session, he says, "Miss Dukins, would you please come to the bench?" And so I walk up there, and he goes, "I was wondering, would you like to have a public defender contract? You seem to be here all the time anyway. I thought you might like to have some cases of your own." And so I said, "Well, let me ask." And so I went back to the office, and of course they said, "Sure, absolutely." And so here we are 21 years later, and now I get to serve for Judge Najjar. So it's a great experience. It was a great confidence booster for a very baby lawyer. That I will always be grateful. And most of you know that I am Miss Mock Trial of Hamilton County, and so I always am searching for help with the judges, from the elected judges, from the bar. And so one of the first years I ran the program, of course my first ask was to Judge Sturtevant. "Judge Sturtevant, will you please judge the finals for me?" "Okay, I'll do that." And so he shows up on a Saturday morning to judge with 2 of his colleagues. And he judges, and there's a winner, and everything is fine. And I thank them, and he says, "Stephanie." I said, "What?" He said,
I can put people in jail for life. I can dissolve marriages and end families. Do not ever ask me to pick one high school mock trial team over another. Ever. And he never does it again. But we will miss him, and he was a great mentor.
My name's Carl Hadley, and I tried my first jury in this courtroom. It was a bit more claustrophobic than it is now. And Chief Crawford was on the bench, and Wayne was the prosecutor. And I didn't know Jack. It was a family matter, and we picked the jury. He got his evidence in right before lunch. So our defense was my client's testimony, and we had engaged Marty Groff, the psychologist, and he counseled my client. So we're back in my office at lunchtime, and now for the first time come the admissions from my client that he committed this offense, and Marty handled the matter masterfully. So now I've got to go to Wayne at hand, halfway through the trial, and I'll never forget that. And he told me that he thought deep down my client was a good guy, and we fashioned a plea that kept my client out of jail and allowed him to serve his term through probation. I had to do a weekend in jail about every 3 months, but considering the offense, it was remarkable, and I never forgot that. And Wayne expected things from people. He expected you to conduct yourself legally, but he also expected you to be a good character. And the cliche, fits me. He not only talks the talk, but he walks the walk. If Wayne thought, when he was a prosecutor, if he thought your client had some redeeming value, you could work with him. If you thought your client was worthless, you were in for a tough road. And so I didn't know how that was going to transfer when he took the bench. But I was pleasantly surprised. And whenever I argued a sentence in front of Wayne, and I may not have agreed with it, but his rulings were always sound, and he always had a reason for it, and I knew that he thought that he was doing the right thing, and you have to respect that. Like Paul, I thought if I could get away with a little levity in the courtroom and get Wayne just to even start to grin, that was a victory. But you got to read the room, and you have to read the room with Wayne. But I'm going to miss it.
Well, not to portray Judge Sturtevant in a negative light after that speech, but I live in Fishers, didn't know it, but I lived down the street from Judge Sturtevant. And there's a golf course attached to my neighborhood, and I used to walk my dog all the time. The golf course kept warning me off, hey, you can't be here, you get hit with golf ball, yada yada. So I started walking the dog at night, right as the sun was going down, when all the golfers were left. I knew I shouldn't be there, but I was doing it anyway. And we're about I'm walking west, the sun's going down, and I'm way out in this golf course. It's a golf course. You can't see the parking lot anymore. It's just, beautiful. And I see a shadow, a guy coming at me from the other direction. I'm like, oh man, who's this? Is this a golf course guy who's going to lecture me again? And then I realized, oh my God, it's Judge Sturtevant. It's Judge Sturtevant coming out here. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm criminally trespassing, and Judge Sturtevant is about to see me. And then I realized, oh, he's trespassing too. Okay. And it turned out we lived down the road from each other for a long time, didn't know it. But I saw him on that golf course so many times that my dog, who hated everyone but me, would actually start wagging her tail and she would see that shadow come over in front of me. And then one day, I caught him in a different area of the golf course. And he said, I just want you to know, I can't walk here anymore. I'm like, really? Why? He's like, well, the golf course actually filed a criminal trespass charge against somebody that's in my court. Oh man, so that was the last time different smirk. He treated us different as councilmen than he did towards defendants. He didn't yell at us, but he would give us that glare that's been mentioned. I was a prosecutor for 3 years. I didn't start litigating in front of Wayne because I was in front of Judge Campbell before as a prosecutor. When I became a defense attorney, also with Stephanie and Steve Holt's office, I started litigating in front of him. And I can remember one hearing, I didn't get the evidentiary ruling that I wanted, so I tried it from another angle. That didn't work. Tried it from another angle, and he finally this was his glare that I would always get. He dropped his head, he'd look at you so you could just see the whites of his eyes, and he'd say, "Move along, counsel." And it wasn't brutal, but it was definitive. And I knew when I would get that was it, that it was time for me to move on. So I tried to adopt that in courtroom 7, so if you're in my courtroom and you get the look, you know now that you've just been Sturtevanted. Also, I've been wearing Judge Sturtevant's robe for the last 2.5 years. It's one of the things they don't teach you when you become a judge. There are different qualities of robes, and when I took the bench, they just gave me a catalog. I ended up getting this robe. It's like heavy canvas and pleated. And by the end of my court day, I started in the winter. By the end of my court day, my shirt is soaked and stuck to my back. I'm like, man, this is really uncomfortable. So I go up to Superior 3. Judge Hughes is sitting in his robe with a sweater vest on. He's cool as a cucumber. I was clear at that point. I was not doing something right. So I started talking to the different judges. And they're like, oh yeah, you need this material, blah, blah, blah. Well, it also happens that my office in courtroom 7 has become the repository for all of the retired judges' robes in that office. I didn't know that until I had this discussion. And so I went down there and I found his robe, and he's the only retired judge who's similar enough in size that I could wear his robe, and I've been wearing it for several years now. I finally told him this. It never occurred. He used to attend the pretrial release meetings after he retired, and I finally told him that. It was the only time in all the 22 years that I've known him that he actually laughed out loud in a manner that was something more than a smirk. So I think he was pleased that his memory is still lingering on the second floor of the Judicial Center.
Well, I guess the old guy gets to go last, too. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I have many memories of Wayne. He's the one who taught me how to be a lawyer and all those times that we used to meet in county court. And Sonny would be at one table and Wayne would be at the other table, and I would have to negotiate all my cases, and we would go over there. And very quickly we would figure out whether or not I had a guy who Wayne thought had something that was retrievable, or whether I had one of those worthless people, so I can understand what Mr. Hadley's talking about. One of my greatest pleasures of serving on the bench was the fact that I got to know Wayne a lot better than I had known him when I was a defensive counsel and he was a prosecuting lawyer. What we saw of Wayne sometimes as judges was a little different than what's been explained here. We often got to see the smiles, and we often got to see him laugh, and we also got to hear ad nauseum, no offense, ladies, but about all your accomplishments and what you were doing. And we got to see Wayne not only as a fine lawyer and a really good judge, but as an amazing father and someone who was very, very proud of his family. I think that this is a tradition that we've had here in Hamilton County for years. Maybe for a while we got away from it. We've been a long time getting here after Wayne's passing because of COVID-19. We knew when this happened that we would do this someday. And I thank you all for being here. I don't think I've ever looked out at one of these meetings and seen more people than I see here today. That speaks well of Wayne. Thank you, members of the family, for being here, and thank you, Lauren, for sharing your stories. We are adjourned.